Welcome to the Tuesday Review. I'm Nathan, as always, joined by James and Callum in the studio. How you going, boys?
Not bad.
Very good. It's a special episode this week.
Yeah, very special.
For our listeners, we got the privilege and the opportunity to talk to a gentleman by the name of Francisco Gonzalez, who is a video game developer. He makes point-and-click adventure games.
Yes.
Kind of like classic pixel art, hand-drawn kind of games.
Yeah.
That are more kind of narratively focused.
Narrative, yeah.
So they're up our alley, so to be kind of story
My
games you
favorite-
can
my
sink
favorite
yourself
genre.
into.
Yep.
Yeah. And we're big fans of his previous games, and we got the chance to talk to him.
Yeah, it was great. He was a really nice guy and he had really great answers. And yeah, it's always good when we can interview interesting people. Yeah, we just wanted to preface this by saying that there was some audio interference on Francisco's end.
It's classic New York City
Yeah,
experience. He beamed in on Zoom all the way from New York, and there was classic construction sounds in the background.
Oh, hey.
Oh, hey, and
I'm
it's like-
walking here. Yeah, there was some background noise occasionally, I think near the beginning of the interview and sort of in the middle, sort of maybe towards the end. And his Zoom was compensating so that it was isolating his voice. So you can still hear what he's saying, but there's this kind of flickering,
Yeah.
electronic-y weird sound. So yeah, if you're listening, it's not your equipment and there's no fault with the recording. It's just the Zoom
That's
was
life,
compensating with the background noise. But you can still hear what he's saying the whole time. So.
We find Zoom a little bit more awkward, I guess, than interviewing someone in the studio like we've done before. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
rambled a little bit too much, maybe. So apologies
Look,
to listeners.
it's always
We're-
hard to tell because you pick up on you. We rely on physical visual cues.
Yeah.
You know,
People who don't talk, I guess, interview people in person as much, don't really kind of recognize the difficulty in Zoom is much different because you're not interacting with people the same way.
Yeah.
We find Zoom interviews a bit more challenging usually when we've done
But
them
the
in
good thing
past.
about Zoom is we can do stuff like this where
Oh, 100%.
interview people overseas and
Yeah.
interview interesting people who we normally wouldn't get the chance
Yeah.
to. So
But we don't have as much riz as we do in the studio.
the little riz we have is reserved for in-person interviews.
That's it.
The very, very minuscule amount. No, but Francisco was really cool and he
was very nice.
Yeah, he was very nice and his answers compensated for our
Yeah.
lack of
Well, there was
skill
like
in
that awkward
interviewing.
moment when he answers your next question completely before you get the chance to ask it, and you're just like,
And you're just like, well, tick
well,
that off the
okay.
list.
And so
Yeah.
it's like, I don't have anything else. Cool, thank you.
No, it was great. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to play the interview live over the air for our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back right after this. Welcome to the Tuesday Review. I'm Nathan, joined by James in the studio. How you going, James?
Well, we're not really in the studio.
No, but the listeners don't need to know that. All right. Okay. How you going, James?
Good, how are you?
Good. We are also joined by a very special guest, and we're very excited to be joined by Francisco Gonzalez. I hope I didn't get the name wrong.
you did not.
All the way from New York, to talk about his upcoming game, Rosewater, which I am a bit of a fan, I have to say. I play through Lamplight City in anticipation for this interview. I grew up on point-and-click adventure games. It's possibly one of my favorite genres. It's one that's not too big. It's bigger and not big at the same time. It's a weird genre of video game because there's lots of developers out there. It's a pretty reasonably sized community, but it's not really one that your average kind of gamer will know much about unless you're already in that sphere. I would argue, to an extent.
I think that's very accurate, yes.
My first question, do you consider yourself more of a game developer or like an author or a writer? Because these games are, I guess what drew me to these games as a kid and as an adult is they're often like movies. And I'm like, we're more of a movie-driven podcast radio show than we are a game-driven radio show, but it scratches the same itch. So I'm like, how much of your time, I guess, making these games is driven just by getting the story right, the script? Like, tell us about that process. How long does that take? Because these are narratively complicated games, especially your
With-
previous game, Lamplight City.
Multiple dialogue options, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's actually a great question. Before I got into games, before I decided that I wanted to do game development when I was a teenager, I wanted to make movies. I was really interested in cinematography and I used to watch movies all the time, and I used to just like pick them apart in my brain and be like, how did they do that? How did they light this shot, or how did they whatever. I never really studied any of that, but it always intrigued me. So a little part of that I always carried into my game development stuff. And yeah, I definitely my process has changed over the years because I started doing this in like 2001 as a hobby. And at that point, I just kind of was learning how to make the games. I've used the same game engine the entire time, which is an engine called Adventure Game Studio, and that's pretty much how I taught myself programming, and that's how I cut my teeth essentially. So while I was learning how to use the engine and how to program and kind of refining my art and everything, I would just kind of make it all up as I went along. Like the first real serious project I did was an 8-part series called Ben Jordan Paranormal Investigator, which you can still download to this day on itch if you're interested. They're free to download, and I learned sort of my narrative. I made all my narrative mistakes with those games. But I started off making them, and I kind of just was making them up as I went along. And by the time I got to the third one, I said, okay, I really want to figure out how many of these I'm going to make, and I want to figure out what the overarching story is going to be. So that's when I sat down and kind of opened up my design document and said, okay, I'm just going to write down everything and refine it as I go. And so I planned out the rest of the series, and I planned out the character arcs and all that stuff. And so that's kind of when I started thinking more seriously about that aspect of game development. And when I started making my games commercially, I still kind of just would write them in engine. Like I would kind of just sit there and say, okay, well, I'm going to have this conversation, but I would kind of just sit there and do it on the fly. It wasn't until Lamplight City, and even more so with Rosewater, that I finally decided to do an external script first. Lamplight City, I wrote all the game's dialogue also while I was making the game, but at the end I exported it all. And I had a script editor who went over it and made changes and stuff, and then I had to put it back into the game. So with Rosewater, I decided to avoid that extra work. I would build the game and just kind of put in placeholder dialogue and then actually write the dialogue more like, not like a movie script because of the interactivity and the branching dialogue, but I definitely had more of a sequence to it. Like I would do it by room, essentially, like by game rooms. So like, say room 1 is exterior of the first screen where it's like outside in the town of Rosewater, whatever. So I would break it up by cutscenes, non-interactive cutscenes where just characters talk and things happen. Interactive cutscenes where like you'll have a character talking to you and then the action will stop and you'll have 3 options just to break it up and let you as the player kind of guide the conversation. And then if there is a character that inhabits that room, I would put in the dialogue with that character as a separate box and then just kind of write the dialogue there. And then, of course, any objects or things you can look at or interact with that the player gives you a message, those would go in there too. So I did that, and it took me about 6 months to write the entire game, just going back and like refining all the dialogue. And so, yeah, that was a lot easier because then I could get it edited and then worry about finalizing it and locking it before actually putting it into the game. So that's... I've lost track of the question, but that was a very long answer.
Yeah, no,
It's a good
pretty
answer.
much got answered.
It's a good
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Yeah, but it's just like when you play. As I get older, I appreciate more the work that goes into the game, not just like the coding and graphics and whatever, but the writing of it. And like when you start to think about it, you're like, is it just that crazy wall with the red string? And like, how complex does it get? But the way you were describing it, it's like, no, you like work in little boxes, like rooms, and it's more
Yeah, I did
segmented.
for Rosewater. With Lamplight City, I did have the crazy wall with the red string, except I did it,
So
except
for
I did it
James,
in a notepad. I did it in a notepad where I basically, like, because Lamplight City was, 5 different cases, it was easier to work with because it was like self-contained stories. But within those self-contained stories, I definitely had like, this is the main plot. Okay, well, what happens if you go here? And I had like, this location. This is what you find here. This is will then lead to this. This will open up this lead. This will do this and that and that. So there was definitely a lot more. I mean, yeah, I'm still old school. I mean, look, this is my Rosewater design document. I don't know if there's any visuals, but like
Yeah.
this was one of the first things that I designed because I was like, I'm going to storyboard this cutscene of this guy flying out a window. So that was, and then like I drew out the map of the town and stuff like that.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
yeah,
no,
so
I
that,
to
yeah.
keep listeners in the loop. The game we're talking about, Lamplight City, is like a Sherlock Holmes-esque kind of
Steampunk.
Victorian steampunk kind of like Sherlock Holmes game with 5 separate cases, but an arching kind of, I guess, main character narrative too.
Yeah.
The thing that drove me crazy about that was like the fact that I can miss clues, I can get the case wrong. The game doesn't fail you. You just get the case wrong and move on with the character's life.
Right.
So I'm like, I can get the wrong ending. And without using a walkthrough, I didn't use a walkthrough for my playthrough. I think I did okay, but I don't know if I got the perfect ending. And I'm like, it's that kind of thing. I'm like, that would drive me crazy writing that out. So you pretty much nailed the answer I wanted. um,
Well, good.
moving on.
Should we?
Sorry,
Oh
go
no, I
on.
was just gonna say. So Lamplight City was your previous game, and now Rosewater is your current game. It's set in the
Yes.
same kind of steampunk 1800s universe, but whereas
Yes.
Lamplight was in like the New York equivalent of the world
Mm.
in on like the city, like urban. This is now on
New
the west, the Wild
New
West side.
Britain, something like
New
that.
New Britannia, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now this is in Vespuccia, which
Uh,
is
well, yeah. So the whole country is called Vespuccia,
oh, the
and it's
country is
divided. Yeah, yeah. So it's like the New Britannia is the city, which is Lamplight. The nickname is Lamplight City. It's like the Big Apple for New York, right?
Hmm.
And then Vespuccia itself is divided into provinces, and Rosewater is in the province of Western Vespuccia.
Okay.
Very, very creative.
Okay.
Actually, I kind of took inspiration from Western Australia,
Oh, really?
honestly, when I was naming it. So, yeah. Um,
No,
but
because I was
yeah,
just
yeah. So, no, go
sorry,
ahead.
I was just gonna say because we haven't really established that they're like the old school point and click adventures,
Right, right.
um, and like deliberately in like a 90s kind of Monkey Island the style kind of thing. Um,
Yeah, I mean, one thing to kind of put an asterisk on that, like, yeah, obviously, I too grew up playing all of the classic adventure games, and they were super influential. And yeah, like, I'm pretty much a one-man team, so I do all the art and animation and stuff, and I've
oh,
had
cool.
to learn how to do that. And I rotoscope all my animations because I'm not a traditional animator, so that
Mm.
means I basically film myself or others performing these animations, and then I
Oh,
trace
that's
over them
cool.
frame by frame.
That's cool.
Which I personally like. Yeah, I personally like because it gives you a lot more like a fluid, realistic
Mm.
movement. But it's also, for my purposes, easier because I can't. I'm not a traditional animator. So, um, but yeah, I mean, I choose pixel art because it's easiest for me and production. Like I know Rosewater's taken a very long time, but that's also because it's the highest resolution game I've ever done. So, all
That
that
sort
all
of
that art
led,
takes time.
yeah, that sort of
Yeah.
led on to my next question. How much duct tape and kind of like super glue is holding Adventure Game Studio together when you're trying to achieve this level of a game?
Not as much because ever since it went open source about 15 or so years ago, it's been constantly updated. So it always makes me laugh. I guess this leads into what I was saying before because, people people look at like, a 320 by 200 or even a 640 by 400 resolution game, pixel art game, and they think, oh, well, this is all Adventure Game Studio is capable of doing. Well, no, it's not. Adventure Game Studio has supported custom resolutions for years. It's just that not that many people have made high resolution games. So as soon as you go high resolution, people are like, "Oh, is this AGS?" Because for some reason there seems to be this assumption that it's only capable of doing those low resolution games. But what I was saying before is like, even though I'm very much influenced and I very much appreciate those old school adventure games. I'm not my goal is not to tell people. My goal is not to make these games and say, "Hey, remember those games you used to love?" Like, if people get that feeling from them, that's great. But my main reason is not to be like, "Oh, hey, remember Monkey Island?" Because I don't know,
Yeah.
I always it always kind of hurts me a little bit when I see other adventure developers and they like stuff these very blatant references to other games because it's like, no, you want people to I want people to play my games and look back on them fondly in 25 years. I don't want people to play my games and be
Yeah.
reminded of games that they liked 25 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I understand that because of the way that they're presented, it's inevitable that people are going to make the comparisons. That's fine. But like, yeah, my main goal uh is not to say, hey, you could be playing a better game, you know. Anyway, that's kind of my soapbox. I'll get off my rant.
No, yeah. I think it's just because we were talking earlier, Nathan was saying that like the point and click adventure kind of it's a big thing for people who are
Mm.
in that circle, but it's not maybe a big thing for like the mainstream.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I don't think even in their heyday, when the heyday of LucasArts and Sierra, I don't think point and click adventures were ever really like super mainstream. They
mm,
were never
No.
they were never triple A
mm,
things. I mean, it just seems like it's that genre specifically has remained kind of insular. It's been really hard to break into the mainstream. I don't know if it ever will, but I mean, there's definitely been strides to innovate in the genre. Like I gave a talk about this at a conference called Adventure X in London last November, basically talking about how common it is in adventure games to have negative feedback. So like 98% of the time you're trying out things and the character or the narrator is telling you, I don't want to do that. I don't that doesn't work, you know.
mm.
And it's like why are you designing games that are meant to be about exploration and yet telling the player no the whole time, right?
And the
So,
player ends up just having to brute force their way
yeah,
when they get
Yeah.
stuck.
and
The
and a
negative
lot of
thing about the
that,
classic games is you just had to
yeah.
drag items to everything and just see if it worked. Yeah.
Right, because the games didn't do a great job of communicating necessarily what you were supposed to do. And I think modern developers now are kind of realizing that and making them more player friendly. And a lot of it has to do with the user interface, like you have the classic 9 verb interface that was in so many of the LucasArts games. But it's like most of the time, if you just, pushed something, it would say, that doesn't move,
Mm.
So it's like, why have these verbs if they're not going to give you, if you're just going to get a generic negative response the whole time, right? So my goal with the talk was to encourage developers to kind of rethink your user interface and instead of just saying, no, I can't do that, like design your games so that when you do stuff, you get, even if it's not the right thing, like at least give a nudge in the right direction or something like that.
Mm.
Because we as people who grew up playing these games, like to us it's second nature, but you put someone new who's never played a point and click adventure game in front of one, they're not going to know what in the world you're supposed to do because it's like the interface is completely alien. So, yeah, I think it's all about like making it clear what you're supposed to do and making the interfaces accessible for modern players if there's ever any hope of expanding the audience.
I think narratively it's more interesting as well because like
Mm,
Nathan was saying with Lamplight, where you don't fail the case. I mean, you fail it, like you don't solve it or
right.
whatever, but the story continues. So it doesn't give you a
Right.
game, it doesn't give you a game over or whatever, or the earlier bad ending or whatever. I think that's much more interesting and engaging, where instead of just getting stuck on, oh, how do I open this door for 3 hours? It's just like, okay, I can still play the game and it's still fun.
I had
Um,
moments like that in Lamplight City, though. All right,
oh, you got
spoiler
stuck.
alert for Lamplight City. I spent way too long trying to find. It was a self combustion case, and I'm like,
Oh yeah.
there's a my own little winch while we're talking to the developer. There's a moment where it's like find the oil and you can test it and on the chemical workbench in the morgue. And I'm like, I spent way too long trying to find this oil, and I'm like, I can't find it. I was gonna have to move on and pray I still solved the case correctly. So there still was some frustration, which goes into my next, because I'm like, I'm not looking up a walkthrough. I'm not doing this. I'm like, I'm playing it like without
No,
distractions.
that's totally
Um,
fair. And like, and the benefit of hindsight now is, as interesting, Lamplight City was very experimental in that I
yeah,
wanted to make a game where it was a detective game where you could get things wrong and still proceed. And it's funny because there are still some people who, I guess, either because they're used to the Sierra design or whatever, that have written reviews on Steam where it's like, I got stuck on a dead end and I had to restart from the beginning, and that's just terrible game design. And then I've had to go in and be like, actually, you
you
can
can wrap up the
continue.
case.
Right. But then that's the thing. It's like, as a player you want to win. So on paper it sounds really cool, like, oh yeah, you can get things wrong, but as a player I want to win. So I understand that frustration, and I going forward, if I were to do another Lamplight City game, I would definitely rethink that approach. But I mean, people have appreciated it, and I think it's interesting, and I enjoyed designing it. So yeah, but
Well, that
it's a very tricky way to balance. I mean, it kind of goes back to the same thing about the constant negative feedback. Like you don't want the game to say no, you were wrong.
Mm.
You know,
well
so
that basically also just answers my next question, which is how do you balance difficulty versus accessibility, which we just talked about.
mm,
So that's handy. Um,
yeah.
I
how
I
do you
mean,
find
the
the time?
difficult. Oh,
Sorry, go on.
no, just as a little bookend to that. Yeah, I think one of the things that I often hear people say is like, oh, older adventure games were so much harder. Nowadays, modern adventure games are too easy. And I think it's because of that, like what we were talking about. Like older adventure games kind of just threw you in, didn't really give you an idea of what you were supposed to be doing, so you had to like bang your head and figure out what the hell to do. And nowadays, there are more logical puzzles, so it makes sense. So you don't have to like, use the weed octopus on the man to like get him into the outhouse to feed him the prunes to whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, so not to name names or anything, but but yeah, so like puzzles make sense now. So therefore, people think, oh, adventure games are too easy. But yeah,
I'll maybe catch some heat for this, but old games in general were too hard. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's like just deliberately padding the game because it's like we
oh
gotta
sure,
we gotta
and
sell
I
this
mean
and keep
I
kids occupied.
well, and I mean, not to get all tinfoil hat conspiracy theory or anything, but I'm pretty much convinced that a lot of the puzzles in Sierra games were made especially
Mm.
difficult so that they could make money on the hint line. So,
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, yeah.
and the hint books, you know?
Yeah. Of course you need to use the rubber chicken on the donkey. Why wouldn't you?
Hmm,
Yeah.
of course.
How do you find time as like a solo indie dev just to manage everything? Because it's not just development. You also have to manage the social medias and the marketing and everything else that goes into dev, not just the scripting and the animation.
Mm.
Like the voiceover work on your games must be insane. Like, how do you find times to like spin? Because all these games are fully voiced games. How do you
Mm.
find times to like spin all the plates?
Well, that's where working with a publisher comes in handy. I've been very lucky to work with a publisher throughout different ones, but I've worked with two publishers throughout my commercial career. And yeah, I mean, the publisher is the one that handles the vast majority of the marketing and stuff. Like I have my own social media accounts, and I do my own self promotion here and there and show like little behind the scenes things to kind of build up hype. But as far as like contacting press and actually doing the Steam stuff and things like that, the publisher handles all of that, which is a great relief to me. Um, and it's the same thing like with the voiceover process. I mean, for me personally, the voiceover process is one of the most fun parts because it's like this nice reward you get after you've been writing the game to hear the actors bring the characters to life. It's fantastic. But as far as the nitty-gritty of casting and the contracts and payment and all of that stuff, yeah, I mean, I hire a casting director to do that. So, um, and yeah, with Rosewater, it was especially interesting because I finally took the leap and went union, and so I worked with SAG-AFTRA. So all of my previous games had been non-union, so it was just a matter of, hire a casting director, do auditions, actors would come in, do their thing, you'd pay them. That was it, right? You could PayPal them as much, you set the rates, whatever. But working with SAG-AFTRA was a lot more complicated. So it was like, we had contracts with the non-union actors too, but like with SAG-AFTRA, it was like the contracts. You also had to do the casting through agents, which was another step. You had we directed everything through Zoom, so at least that was easier than like having to worry about studio rental and stuff like that. But like, yeah, afterwards it was like you had to deal with a payroll company, make sure that the checks went out on time, a bunch of stuff. And that was, I did the brunt of that minus the casting and the contract work. Like I had to actually deal directly with the payroll company, but it wasn't that big a deal. But again, it was just like I had fun and I got to work with some amazing people. Like the cast of Rosewater, I still pinch myself because we got like some amazing people. We got can I like
rattle them off
here and tell you
Oh yeah, please do.
Okay, yeah. So I'm trying to think people. It's difficult because it's like I know everybody and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited. But some people are like, who? And then you say what they were and they're like, oh yeah. So like, I guess probably the most well known at this point is Roger Clark, who was Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh wow.
He plays 3 characters, including this great Irish sea captain, who's like one of my favorite roles for him. But like we got Cam Clark, who was the original Leonardo in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. He was Liquid Snake. He's been I don't know how many things, and if you've played a game or watched a cartoon or something in the last 40 years, you've surely heard Cam Clark. We got I guess a telltale trio of Dave Fennoy, Sissy Jones, and Gavin Hammond, who are Lee, Katya, and Kenny, respectively, in Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1. Sissy Jones was also Delilah in Firewatch. Yeah, just a bunch of people. We got 22 actors, and they were all amazing, and it was fantastic working with them, and I'm super excited for people to hear it, because
what's it like directing the voice performances? Do you do that personally? Are you like,
yeah.
Can you faster and more intense?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. The thing is the kind of I don't want to say mantra, but the general rule of thumb is well, I guess yeah, you don't want to be as a director, you don't want to be you want to let the actors do their thing, right? And so ideally the best thing is if you don't have to do any directing at all, because you've provided enough context that the actor just kind of goes with it. But yeah, sometimes, if there's a word or if there's a sentence where like there's an ambiguity as to which word should be pronounced, you can go back and be like, can we get that again, but with emphasis on you instead of this? Like, how did you find this thing? How did you find this thing? That sort of thing. Or, if it's as simple as just like, this next line, can we do it again, but angrier because you're saying this to someone who punched you in the face 10 years ago, right? That sort of thing. But yeah, I like to just kind of let back and let them do their thing. You don't want to get the last thing you want to do is be like, actually, you should say it like this.
Yeah.
There's
Especially
that
when you've hired such talented people, you're like, you got the right people for the job. Let them do the job.
Exactly. There's that famous clip of William Shatner getting mad at the guy who's like telling him, do it like this. So yeah, you never want that to happen.
Yeah.
Are we going to be able to see any bonus content at the end of Rosewater like we did with Lamplight City? Is there potential for that? Because that's one thing I really appreciated when I finished the game and I got the bonus content to see some artwork and some like bloopers. And there was like a blooper reel, James, of like the
that's
voice
cool.
acting after the game, which I found really entertaining. I like sat there and like
Yeah,
listened to all the lines.
I
Can we see
definitely have
anything more
been.
like that?
Yes, I've definitely been compiling bloopers. There haven't been as many. That's the problem with getting like,
Uh,
experienced pro voice actors is that there's not as many because they don't mess up as much. But there's some good ones. And yeah, I think I've got some concept art and stuff. I'll definitely do. Yeah, I love throwing all that stuff in, so definitely. I'll probably do another audio commentary. Time permitting, we'll see if I do it at launch or if I do it as a DLC like I did with Lamplight City.
Mm.
But
See,
yeah.
I didn't know there was a commentary for Lamplight City
Oh,
because
now
I
you
didn't
have
have
to
the
go
DLC. I
back.
just played the basic. There you go.
Yeah.
No, there was I released it as an update like a year after it came out, so
Okay,
it
I'll have to
should
go
be
back
in
and
there.
for my next playthrough, I shall listen to it.
All right.
On a related note, is there a chance that we can see Miles, Adelaide, or Upton again in the future?
Oh, well, that would be a spoiler, wouldn't it?
It would.
Um,
I'm like, I could ask this question. I might not get answered, but that's fine. I'm like,
I'm,
but I have to, as a fan, come on, I have to know.
I will
Is
say
there
that
potential?
there's a non-zero chance that
Okay,
you might
good,
see at
good
least
enough for
one
me.
of them in the future. Yes.
Well, they're all the questions I have. Is
I
there anything
just
else you want to talk about Rosewater?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I just had one more question about because we was talking earlier about like the old school point and click, but also and we also talked about you were influenced by Western Australia, and we're talking about movies before.
hmm
My interest more than anything is old westerns, like movies.
Hmm.
Do you have any influences or any specific things you drew from any old movies?
Um, it's funny because, and pardon me, my eye is bothering me.
That's all right.
Um, it's funny because I was never really a big fan of westerns until I guess recently.
Hmm.
And even still, like, I'm not really a huge fan of like the classic spaghetti westerns. I kind of like more the neo westerns. Like, if you
Yeah.
count There Will Be Blood as a western, that's probably my favorite
Yeah.
western. Um, but yeah, no, I've definitely had some influence from. I'm trying to think what the most blatant film reference that I've put into Rosewater is. I know I definitely. Did you see Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know the scene where he goes up and Sam Rockwell's character goes up and throws Caleb Landry Jones's character out the window and he rolls down the awning and just kind of goes boom. I totally stole that for the defenestration scene where like I was like, yes, this is how I want to do this. So that's definitely a nod to that. What else? Yeah, I don't know. I guess I mean, this is not a spoiler because it kind of is expected, but it is a western. So like the final climactic scene is like a showdown,
Okay,
a
yeah.
standoff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously there's that, and like I put in placeholder music from like Ennio Morricone
Mm.
soundtracks, and I sent them to my composer and said, "Look, this is what we're doing, but don't do a ripoff."
Yeah.
Which is great. But yeah, there's definitely little bits of influence here and there. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but if I do a commentary, I'll definitely talk about
Yeah.
it.
No,
Is there anything that you wanted to include in this game that you couldn't? Anything you had to cut?
Yes, actually, I wanted to have an interactive campfire scene where you sing along and like sing about your companions, like a la The Curse of Monkey Island, but I couldn't figure out how to make it work technically. So there is a campfire song, but it's not interactive, unfortunately. Because I guess I should probably mention like, so Rosewater, obviously it's a point and click, it's a western, it's about a treasure hunt, more or less. But the kind of unique selling point of Rosewater is that you go on this journey with 5 companion characters, and your relationship with the companion characters affects the trajectory of the story. So like if you, so the second part of the game, which is kind of the journey part, there's little. It's kind of like they're on this wagon, they're going across the frontier, and then so the wagon is kind of like your hub area where you can talk to them, and then as you go, things happen. So you have little vignettes, which are like 5 or 10 minute scenes where there's a puzzle or something or an encounter or whatever. But then there's each companion has a specific like story related excursion related to them. But there's one for high relationship and there's one for low relationship. So you won't get the same thing necessarily through each playthrough. So yeah, the reason I wanted to do an interactive campfire sing-along was because I wanted to kind of like have it where it would be the song, and the song would be kind of like singing about their journey so far, and then it's like, you know, so and so can shoot, blah blah blah, and like you can either be like, yeah, but he couldn't hit the side of a barn, or you know, like lyrics that would either talk them up or tease them or something like that. Yeah. But yeah, I couldn't make it work. But yeah, anyway, beyond that. Yeah, so the main thing with Rosewater is that I've been throwing this phrase around a lot. I want Rosewater to feel like you're going on a road trip with your friends. So that's kind of the feeling I want players to get.
Fantastic. I mean, from what we've seen on Twitter and like all the socials, it looks like a really good time. And
there's also a demo. You can download a demo on Steam. It's a little outdated, but it gives you a general idea of what to expect.
How long has it been in development for?
5.5 years.
Nice.
But hopefully, it'll be out later this year.
Okay, good. So you don't have
I don't have a set release date yet, but I've given myself until the end of July to figure out whether I can announce a release date or I can continue saying later this year.
Well, who was it? Was it Miyamoto who said a rushed game is never good, but what's the quote?
It was
bad forever.
Yeah.
No, and it's true, and it's like I'm at this point right now where I'm like, I don't want to cut corners because I feel like any cut corner would just be a disservice to all the time I've been working on it previously, you know. So yeah.
No, yeah, we'd rather wait for the best possible outcome. Yeah. I just wanted to mention, because I found this screenshot for audio listeners. I've got a screenshot from the game as my background. And it's like a saloon fight.
Yes.
Just like that, there's 6 characters all having fisticuffs at different points in the saloon.
That was one of the first like big scenes I animated, and it was a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no. So there's fisticuffs. There's that. Is there? Like shootouts. Duels or
no, there's a couple of two. There's 2 sequences where you can shoot. I actually, going back to cutting things, I did cut another sequence because, and not to get too spoilery. Yes, spoilery. Not to get too spoilery, but the reason I cut it was because it was another thing, because like the companions and the relationships are so at the forefront of the gameplay here. I also wanted to design puzzles, or some puzzles, to have multiple approaches or multiple solutions, and sometimes that means, you know, if a companion suggests a way of doing something, you can choose that way of doing things. So there's a scene towards the end of the second act where you can there's a shootout. Okay, it's kind of, let's just leave it at that. There's a shootout, and there's enemies that are shooting at you, and there were 2 ways to do it. You could either go with one of your companion's suggestions and do this sequence of puzzles, which involved all of the companions kind of working together to help you do that. Or you could ask one of your companions to borrow his gun and just shoot the guys yourself. And right, so I was like, well, if you do that, it should be extra tricky because it's, you know,
Yeah.
it should be hard. So I had a really hard time balancing it to make it seem challenging but fair.
Mm.
And I was like, well, if players do this too much and they can't do it, then it's going to be frustrating. So I sat down and I thought, okay, first of all, I don't think most players are going to do this. Second of all, it completely bypasses this entire great chain of like working with your companions. And third of all, we've never established that the main character is good with a gun. And there are some sequences where she shoots like bottles and goes hunting and stuff, but she doesn't actually like kill a bunch of guys with the exception of this one scene. So
Total
narratively,
clash.
it was ludonarrative dissonance. So in the end, I cut it, and it saved me a bunch of animation. But I also think it's a stronger sequence for it. So.
Yeah.
But there is some shooting. It's just not quite.
Not
It's not-
bloodthirsty.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
Exactly.
the solution to every puzzle is can I shoot it? Is not, or should I say it's not a can I shoot
Right.
it?
Although you do, one of your companions is a demolitions expert, so the solution to a few puzzles is can I just blow it
Blow
up?
it up. Yeah.
There is
So you
that.
still scratch that itch.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's still some action. It's just not, you know. It was actually that scene in particular you're talking about was interesting because it was like I knew I wanted to have a saloon fight, but then I had to think about it in terms of an adventure game puzzle.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not like you're Indiana Jones, you get involved punching too. It's like you have to think about how to resolve the saloon fight in an adventure gamey way. And it was also fun because I rotoscoped all the animations, so with the exception of the main character, I am all of those
Oh,
characters.
yeah.
So I was on both sides, yeah, punching myself.
Any other questions, James?
Yeah, so before we started recording, we were talking about merch. And we said,
Right.
yeah, you need to make a Rosewater t-shirt or something like that. So hopefully that's coming up after, when the game's released.
I already have an idea for one. The guy in the red coat there in the screenshot behind you, Gentleman Jake Ackerman, who's like
Where is he? He's the one upstairs?
He's the one upstairs, yeah.
Yeah.
He's the guy that kind of lets the whole story go in motion. He's the leader for this treasure hunt, and he's kind of like the fast talking, cowboy hero. I want to do a tank top with him with his gun that says "Suns out, suns out, guns out." I have yet
That would be
to
great.
actually print that. Yeah. But anyway, you were asking about merch.
Oh, no, yeah, no, that's all. Yeah, it was just,
Okay.
that would be a fun thing.
Yeah.
And also we were talking about your background. You got the pirate flag, and I was
Yes.
saying that you've got Lamplight City, now you've got Rosewater. Pirate game next?
Nah.
No.
Pirate game. I mean, we already have Monkey Island.
Oh yeah, it's
We were
too
talking
similar.
before about not wanting to
Then-
be one of those, not wanting to have
Yeah.
one of those games like, remember this game?
Yeah, remember?
Like
Yeah.
anytime someone kind of goes anywhere near like a pirate game, everyone's just like, oh, it's Monkey Island.
Monkey Island, yeah.
Yeah, making a pirate game is just asking for it. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
and plus, I have no interest in making a pirate game. I've played plenty and I enjoy them. I have no interest. I
think-
am interested in exploring more of the world of Vespuccia and returning to Lamplight City, but
Have you
I think I'm gonna take. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just so you've come up with these two sort of parts of Vespuccia. Do you have ideas for other parts already?
I have an idea for at least one other.
Okay, cool.
But that's going to be way down the line.
Yeah.
For sure, because this game has taken so long, I already know what I'm doing next, and it's going to be a linear game that will
Yeah.
take hopefully at most 2 years because I can't go through another production cycle like this right away, or
Going back to what you were saying, tangentially related, I guess the kind of narrative archetypes between a pirate game looking for treasure and Rosewater are very similar,
Similar,
if just
yeah.
the environment's different anyway.
Mm.
So it's still going to scratch that itch. You still got a bunch of characters
Mm.
on a wagon trail looking for treasure. I'm like, what's the difference between that and the characters on a boat looking for treasure? So
exactly.
the same
Mm.
but different. Like I think players are still going to get the same kind of experience out of that they would a pirate game anyway.
Mm. Mm.
I have no other questions. James, do you have anything else to add?
I think that's it.
Did you want to have anything you wanted to talk about specifically, Francisco?
I think we covered everything.
No?
Yeah.
No? Perfect. One last question. We always like to ask our guests. Barbie and Oppenheimer, or Oppenheimer then Barbie?
That does.
I didn't see either of them, but I would say probably Oppenheimer and then Barbie because you
Yes.
want to have the
Correct.
the
Yes,
downer
correct.
and then the
Correct
happy
answer.
thing after, right?
We asked one filmmaker we interviewed that question when the movies were coming out, so it was
Yeah.
appropriate. But now
It's still relevant. It's still relevant.
Nathan's making it a signature thing now. Yeah, correct answer. It is Oppenheimer first, then Barbie. If you watch it the other way around, you're a psychopath. But you should watch both of them. They're both very good.
All right. I will.
Do you
Alrighty.
want to plug? So there's no set release date, but hoping Rosewater is out end of the year.
Yes, before the end of the year.
Wish list
I have
on.
plenty of other things to plug. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
You
plug everything. Wish list on Steam, all that.
can wish
all that
list.
stuff.
Yeah, you can wish list Rosewater on Steam. You can wish list it on GOG.com as well. Lamplight City is also on Steam and GOG and Nintendo Switch and iOS. My other games, I've made a game called Shardlight previous to this, which is a post-apocalyptic story, which I made in 2016, and then it sadly came true. And my first game was called The Golden Wake, and it's a historical drama about a real estate agent in 1920s Miami. That one's also on Steam and GOG. All of my Ben Jordan games are on itch.io. I do a weekly development stream on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern called Wild West Wednesday, where I just stream for a couple of hours while I'm developing Rosewater. So I don't know if that necessarily works time zone wise for your audience, but you can catch all the VODs on Twitch later. And I also, what else? I have a YouTube channel. You can go to my website. It's just Grundislav, GRUNDISLAV.games, and all of my pertinent links are there. So yeah, that's about it, really.
all your social media is Grundislav.
Pretty much, it's either Grundislav or Grundislav Games.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm
Cool.
on Twitter, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Mastodon, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on TikTok, but I never post on TikTok because I don't get it. I'm too old for TikTok. But, yeah.
We'll post your socials as well. We'll plug it when
in the
we
description.
post for the week on our social media as well. Thank you for joining us, Francisco.
Thank you so much.
We're very excited for Rosewater. I'm very excited for Rosewater.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, look, I'm a big fan of just the industry that is the adventure games. So it's always
That's
exciting
also
for
very
me to
nice
get
to
the
hear.
chance to talk to someone behind the scenes, making these games and support them. Thank you for giving us your time today.
My pleasure.
And maybe we'll talk to you again at some indeterminate point in the future when Rosewater is closer to release.
All right. Sounds good.
You are back live on 98.9 Northwest FM. Thank you again, Francisco, for giving us this opportunity, and we'll be right back after these quick messages. Okay, you're back on the Tuesday review. Thank you for, if you got through that entire interview with my rambling, thank you for sticking around.
At least you asked good questions. I was like, so
Again,
do you like
again,
games?
again.
Do you have games
do you
on your
like
phone?
stuff?
Look, again, Zoom interviews are more difficult than in-person interviews, in my experience. Obviously, opinions may vary. But as I said before, Alan Deep is now here as well. How you going, Alan?
What's going on? I'm doing all right.
Yeah, I was just saying to Alan, saying to the boys before, Alan, we don't have the same rears on Zoom as we do in the studio.
No, yeah, I had that during the intro.
Because Alan's like, I'm aware.
Riz, what Riz?
You guys got Riz?
Yeah. Yeah, so thanks again, Francisco, for giving us the opportunity to talk about Rosewater and his upcoming game. A little bit of housekeeping before you end the show. We were off last week, but we weren't doing nothing. So our YouTube is barreling forward. This time next week, we'll be up to current on the YouTube as far as the podcast episodes get released. So then from next week, you'll have the opportunity to listen to the podcast on YouTube at the same time as it kind of releases on the other podcast platforms as well. And we've also got PAX videos coming out now.
Yep.
And we have our
Interviews.
first YouTube short.
Yes.
There, thank you. Thanks to Alan.
It's based
Yeah.
on our Scream 6 review.
Yep.
So check that out. We're trying, again, getting into the video content. It's not easy, especially when you don't have any experience, but we're trying.
Yeah.
That's
So the video episodes of the podcast is just the audio with
Yeah.
a picture, but the PAX interviews and YouTube shorts are like actual video content. So make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube and like and share all that stuff and watch those on YouTube.
yeah, look,
And also the interview with Francisco will be there will be the audio podcast, and then we're going to release the video.
yes, I'll release
well?
the Zoom video as well
Yeah.
tomorrow. As long, it's
So
the same time.
we should have said that at the beginning. You can just watch the video
Yeah.
interview if you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a little, I guess I will say Easter eggs, but there's a little bit more visual information in the Zoom video.
Yeah,
you
and
see
you
some
can-
notepad scribbles and
Yeah,
some other exciting little tidbits.
yeah. Our ugly faces, and then Francisco's beautiful, and he shows some stuff. So yeah, check that out.
Yeah, I reckon that's about all the time we've got for tonight.
Yeah, check out we'll have all the links in the description.
Yeah, we'll post everything tomorrow.
Of Rosewater, and where you can follow Francisco.
Yes,
and all
play
that.
his previous games as well,
Yeah.
Lamplight City, Golden Wake and Shardlight,
Yep.
in anticipation for Rosewater. Rosewater's set in the same, it was discussed in
Universe,
the interview, in
yep.
the same universe as Lamplight City. So if you're interested, play that first. It's a good one. Thanks for listening, everyone. You can also follow us on Letterboxd. Just because we're not doing the show, say we didn't do a show last week, we still watch
Yeah.
a lot of stuff, and we still have opinions.
Yes, so make sure you follow us there. So then, if you see us watch something and you want us to discuss it in more detail, let us
Yeah.
know and we can talk about it on the show. We haven't put those in the descriptions yet. Maybe we should put those in the description so people can see where
Yeah.
to follow us. I'm Channel Drifter, all one word.
I'm Nathan B _90,
Yep.
And I'm Callum Tuesday.
and Alam is.
Alum 20, nice and easy.
Yeah. And if you
Except he
follow
hasn't
us-
posted on there.
If you follow us, you can see what other bangers James is going to give 2 stars.
Oh, we'll talk about that next week, my friend.
The fight's beginning.
You're 0 for 2.
Again, thanks for listening, everyone. Please like and share the Tuesday Review on Facebook, Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, Newsmast, and Twitter
Yeah, at Tuesday Review AU
on all platforms.
on all platforms.
Also, like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Again, more content coming every day, and up to a certain point, and then multiple times a
Yeah.
week, we hope. That's about all the time we've got for tonight. Thanks for listening, everyone. Adios, cousins.